it's such a pleasure to introduce Barbara Herweg. Barbara comes with a wealth of experience in general business and financial management in the research environment. Barbara is the project manager within the research support unit at Wits Commercial Enterprise. This is at the University of Witwatersrand. So both Barbara and her organization are internationally recognized in that the research unit itself was the recipient of the 2017 DST Zarima Excellence Award for Organizational Excellence in Research Management. Barbara in 2020 was awarded Research Management Professional status by the International Profession Recognition Council. This was following the first open call for professional recognition of research managers from across the African continent. So it's a great honor for us to have Barbara here, and her presentation, I'll remind you again, is on research management style and culture, setting and running equitable partnerships. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to Barbara. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really quite excited to see that there are so many people that are interested in this subject matter, because it is becoming so much more significant in the work that we do. And now if I can just find my button. So I wanted to look at, as a form of introduction, the way that research has been viewed. And most of us that have got some kind of research training or experience in our backgrounds will recognize this. And I found this pictogram when I was still a student, and it shows the pitfalls and tribulations that every researcher goes through. And we were kind of told that research tended to be a lone activity, that you had to be a technical expert, that you would have a hypothesis and that would be tested, and you'd possibly have to troubleshoot, and you'd publish, and there would be reporting. And so most researchers in the very recent past would have seen themselves within this context, where really the challenges that you experienced were very much in the actual technical work. Of course, the world has changed a lot since then. In addition to the technical excellence and everything else that is required, now work has to be multidisciplinary, it has to be multi-institutional and multinational. Also, there is the advent of contract research and consulting work. We all know that there are intellectual property requirements that come with projects nowadays. There are demands to have skills development. There has to be ethics and integrity. We need to measure impact, diversity, gender, stakeholders. So is this more like the paradigm that you recognize currently, is the question that I like to ask at this point, even if you're not actively involved in the actual research work anymore. So we need to focus today on this idea of this multidisciplinary, multi-institutional, multinational work that also allows for this measurement of equity in our partnerships and the work that we do. So there's all of these levels of complexity as we drill down through this research paradigm. So it's important to always consider your partner context. And we like to tell our young researchers that it's important to use pre-existing relationships when you are starting out on collaborative work. And that comes in quite nicely from Sarah's talk, that you start small. And so you could go to your co-supervisor, to your international or strategic partnerships office, find out about bilateral agreements between institutions or countries. Then there are regional networks that you can also leverage. and that it's important to identify researchers that have got common research goals. And in fact, that opportunities can be identified through various staff exchange programs so that you can cross-pollinate ideas. And it's important to really know your partners and know what their strengths are and how you can leverage that, but also identify what their weaknesses are and how you can bring the strengths of your organization to support your partner with these. So really it's about building those relationships already on an individual level. And that's something that I like to carry through as a theme, that we need to more and more have these relationships, not only amongst the research community, but also amongst those of us that support that research endeavor. And so when one starts to look at project development, one of the things that you would need to look at is developing your proposal, and alongside that, your budget. And so we have a kind of overall checklist of the things that you would need to consider. So there is the who is involved, what will they do, where will they work, what other requirements will there be. And again, as part of the drill down that we're journey that we're conducting at the moment, is that what are the partner or consultant issues that need to be addressed. And in terms of budgets, we always have all of these checklists of things that you need to understand and build into your budget, even if it doesn't end up being in your final funder budget, because you need to consider what your funder requirements are. But as soon as you are looking at a partner in a different country, you need to also understand what are their institutional requirements, how do their overheads and administrative costs work, the differences that they will have within their own legislative frameworks in terms of VAT, duties, taxes, and also what is the impact of inflation on their economy. Is that something that you can also build in to the budget, especially over a multi-year project? That can be very important for those of us where there is a higher inflation rate. Also, bank charges. When you're transferring funds to a foreign institution, it means that they need to pay bank charges. Can you include these in your budget? Also, exchange rates. When you're working with people that are in countries with more volatile currencies, you need to take into consideration that there needs to be some kind of contingency for whatever those fluctuations are. Also, specifying payment terms. Sometimes it's very difficult or impossible for institutions to start working on a project without there actually being money in the project. And there may be more or greater flexibilities as you move to first world situations, in that institutions may have some kind of buffer funding available, but that becomes less prominent as you move. And also then there are procurement processes and what those entail at all of your partner institutions, especially if there are imported items. So these are the kinds of things that we kind of are our bread and butter issues. And I thought that I would start with the bottom up from our desk to maybe other ideas. So already in this process, conflict can arise from a competing understanding of funder requirements. And this can be between institutional partners, that the guide is read differently, but also between technical and research managers. There's often a technical need in perceiving the funder guideline in a certain way, and it may perhaps misinterpreting what might be governance requirements. So it's important for these people to work together in the various roles that we have, so that we can bring that value to the final proposal. Also, there can be a mismatch between funder and institutional requirements. And obviously these can be enhanced when you then have other institutions involved that is not only your institution. So you need to also establish what are the institutional requirements from any partners. And then there are the stakeholder requirements. And Sarah touched on these quite nicely in terms of where the benefits will be experienced. And these also need to be taken into consideration so that there is an equitable impact to the project at the end of the day. So some of the additional challenges that can happen is are the following. There's language, there's time zones, there are teams with diverse cultural backgrounds, there are different technical disciplines and different skill levels that can arise from these complex projects. In terms of language, we don't all necessarily speak a common language, as much as we might have a common professional language. But there's also variation of the use of language regionally, so there might be differences in understanding. And what isn't listed here, and which is probably the most important, is the funder jargon, because they also have their own language. So not only do we need to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, but that we also understand that funder terminology correctly. And then there are the time zones. So if you've got very dispersed teams, you need to be able to, as a research manager or even as the research leader, to be able to take into consideration those different time zones, so that when deadlines and things are set really on a very practical level, that needs to be understood. But then there's also the culture around time may vary across different regions around the world. And even within the institution, the partner institutions, there may be differences in terms of that culture around time, which really arises from the institutional structure. So you might say that you want, for example, a signature by a certain time and date, but you need to take into consideration that institution's practice, and that is a culture around time. Then we have teams with diverse cultural backgrounds. Projects can have teams with different technical disciplines, and again, that will come with language and skill levels. And within a project, we will have maybe professorial team members, but then we will also maybe have interns, and we need to be able to communicate across the project range correctly with each different skill level. And so what I've become interested in is really kind of from business management, the organizational culture theory and how that can be applied to research management. And I'm really going to encourage you to try and find some readings, or I will try and find you some references, and I'll try and share that with the team to share with you all, because I think it's important to understand that these projects become organizations on their own, and that many of the theories around organizational culture apply to these projects. And it really comes down to project size by budget and team size, how diverse your team is in its geographic location, what is the leadership style of your research leader, and your leader's absorptive capacity, and the effects of these on team trust, which is central to the success of a project, but also governance awareness, which we know that very often funders have got audit requirements, and even more now they are requiring technical audits of the work that's being conducted. and this becomes related to risk on the project, and then ultimately project success. And so in general, large projects with a high budget and large project teams are better when there are technical team leaders that have transparent communication and absorptive capacity. Teams reflect more trust and there is reduced risk to the project. And when the project leadership style is transformational, this is associated with governance awareness and absorptive capacity. And all of this leads to successful projects. So the ideal research leader is someone who has the transformational leadership style, has high absorptive capacity, has high governance awareness, because this increases team trust and reduces project risk, and encourages transparent communication. And as we've said, communication is so important across equitable projects. And the ideal research manager should be able to support the communication within the team, support governance awareness, and in that process, reduce project risk and increases team trust. So it's nice we can talk about all of these ideals. And so how can we drive the transparent communication? Through formal communications, such as steering committee and steering committee minutes. These should comprise of both technical and research managers. And so there should be a sharing of information across both the technical and research management team. One could use web pages and newsletters to inform stakeholders of project information that is important. And then I think it's important for there to be a research management community of practice. This should not be limited only to the technical colleagues. There's a lot of emphasis on allowing for that kind of funding for meetings to happen so that projects can be initiated. But I think that these need to include research managers. And I think in the time of Corona, we've had wonderful opportunities to have meetings such as this one, where we can meet with fellow colleagues. And these networks are going to become increasingly important because it's important for us to share that institutional information and learning so that when we do come to set up these equitable partnerships, we're already equipped with that information. So equitable partnerships arise from understanding the partner context, understanding the external influences on a project. So things like inflation, the institutional requirements from the partner, but also developing the leadership skills of the PI, because it's great that they're technical experts, but they also need to now more and more take on these additional roles, especially as project teams become more diverse and we need to look at equitability. And then also to develop the research management professional support and develop the professionals that undertake these roles. And also I think it's critically important that that research leader and RM partnership is enhanced. And we need to take a step to look at increasing the understanding and the mutual benefit that can arise from that partnership. And then it is about building networks and community of practice. Thank you. I hope that you have found that interesting. And feel free to contact me. My email is at the bottom of this slide presentation, which I think will be shared. I need to just update the team with this. So thank you very much.